People think trust disappears all at once. It doesn't. It disappears the moment you realize someone had 100 chances to tell you the truth and chose another day instead. The strange part is, when my fiancée's sister told me I didn't know the woman I was about to marry, I didn't believe her. By the end of that weekend, I wasn't sure I even knew myself. My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 35 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've spent the last 12 years designing buildings. I've always believed every strong structure depends on one thing: a solid foundation. If the foundation is honest, everything else can survive. If it isn't, the cracks eventually find their way to the surface. I learned that lesson from my father, not because he was an architect, because he was a liar. When I was 16, my mother discovered he'd been living a second life for nearly 8 years. Another apartment, another woman, another child. The affair wasn't what destroyed our family. The lies did. For years afterward, my mother kept saying the same sentence: I could have survived the truth. What I couldn't survive was finding out everyone else knew before I did. That sentence stayed with me long after my parents divorced. It shaped every relationship I ever had. I wasn't perfect. I didn't expect perfection from anyone else. But I had one rule, one that I'd repeated to every woman I ever dated. I can forgive almost anything. Just don't make me discover it from someone else. Then I met Olivia Brooks. She was the first person who never made that rule feel necessary. We met almost 3 years before our wedding. I was presenting a proposal for a new children's community center. She was representing the nonprofit that would eventually operate it. Halfway through my presentation, the projector stopped working. The screen went black. The room filled with awkward silence. Then someone near the front quietly laughed, not at me, at the situation. She smiled and said, "Maybe it's a good thing. If the idea is strong enough, it shouldn't need slides." The room relaxed immediately. People smiled. So did I. After the meeting, I bought her coffee to thank her. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became another date, then another. Being with Olivia never felt exciting in the dramatic sense. It felt peaceful, like coming home after a very long day. She remembered little things, the way I always forgot my sunglasses, the fact I hated mushrooms but loved mushroom soup. She knew exactly when to leave me alone after a difficult meeting, and exactly when not to. She volunteered as a child psychologist 3 evenings every week. She donated more money than she could comfortably afford. She cried during rescue dog commercials. She once spent an entire Saturday helping an elderly neighbor fill out insurance paperwork because nobody else would. Everyone who met her said the same thing: she's one of the genuinely good ones. I believe that too, more than anyone. 8 months before the wedding, I proposed during a weekend hiking trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I barely opened the ring box before she started crying. She nodded over and over. Yes, Ryan, yes. It remains the happiest memory of my life. Or maybe the happiest memory of the life I thought I had. Our wedding was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. The rehearsal dinner took place the night before. It was also the first time I was going to meet most of Olivia's family. She rarely talked about them. Not because she disliked them. She always smiled and said, "My family's complicated." I'd never pushed for details. Every family carries something. Mine certainly did. I already knew her mother, a quiet woman named Susan. I'd met a few cousins over the years, but the person I knew best was Olivia's older sister, Claire. Claire couldn't have been more different. Olivia trusted people. Claire investigated them. She worked as an investigative journalist in Chicago. She noticed everything, forgot nothing, asked questions that made other people uncomfortable. Still, she'd always been respectful toward me. Maybe a little distant, but never rude. When Olivia told me Claire had volunteered to organize the rehearsal dinner herself, I laughed. I guess she finally approves of me. Olivia smiled. She wouldn't put in this much effort if she didn't. Looking back, I wonder whether Claire had already decided what she was going to do. The restaurant overlooked Lake Norman. Long wooden tables, soft music, candles. About 30 members of Olivia's family. The evening was everything I'd imagined. Her uncle embarrassed her with childhood stories. Her cousins teased me about joining the family. Her mother hugged me twice before dessert. For the first time, I understood what people meant when they talked about gaining another family. Halfway through dinner, Claire stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I'd like to make a toast." Everyone quieted. She smiled at Olivia. "My little sister has spent her whole life trying to make other people's lives better." Olivia rolled her eyes. The room laughed. Then Claire looked directly at me. "And Ryan, I truly believe you're a good man." I thanked her. She raised her glass. "My only wish is that the two of you never keep secrets from each other." Something about the way she said the word secrets made me look up. Our eyes met. For just a second, her smile disappeared. Then it returned. Everyone toasted. Everyone except me. Because for the first time that evening, something felt wrong. 20 minutes later, I stepped outside to answer a call from my best man. Evening. Something felt wrong. 20 minutes later, I stepped outside to answer a call from my best man. When I hung up, Claire was standing alone near the edge of the terrace, looking out across the lake. She didn't turn around when she heard my footsteps. Instead, she quietly said, "I've been trying to convince myself not to do this." I frowned. "Do what?" She finally looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. Not angry tears, not bitter ones, the kind that come when someone knows they're about to hurt two people they love. She reached into her purse, pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front, in Olivia's handwriting. She held it toward me. She wrote this: "The week you started dating." I stared at it. "What is it?" Claire swallowed. "It's the truth. I didn't take it. If it's so important, why didn't she give it to me herself?" Claire closed her eyes for a moment, then quietly answered, "Because every year she found another reason to wait." She placed the envelope into my hand. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "And if you marry my sister tomorrow, before you know what's inside, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering whether you ever really knew the woman you married." I looked down at the envelope. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. I knew that whatever was inside had survived almost 3 years without being read. Once I opened it, there would be no going back. Claire didn't rush me. She simply stood there, looking out across the lake. Finally, I asked, "Why today?" She let out a quiet breath. "Because tomorrow changes everything. You've had 3 years. I know. So why wait until the night before my wedding?" She nodded slowly. "Because I spent 3 years hoping she'd tell you herself. And she didn't. No, not once." I looked back at the envelope. "If this is really that important, why didn't you just mail it?" Claire gave a sad smile. "Because it isn't my truth to tell." "Then why are you telling it?" Her answer came immediately. "Because if you hear it after the wedding, you'll never forgive either of us." That sentence stayed with me. Not Olivia, either of us. I slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket. "I'm not opening it." Claire frowned. "What?" "Not without Olivia." For the first time that evening, Claire actually looked relieved. She nodded once. "Good. You still trust her." "I do." She smiled sadly. "I hope you still can after tonight." Then she walked back inside, leaving me alone on the terrace. The drive home was strangely quiet. Olivia rested her head against the passenger window. She looked happy, relaxed. She talked about flowers, about the photographer, about how nervous her mother had been all day. I answered when I had to, but my mind never left the envelope. In my jacket. Eventually she noticed. "You've been quiet. Long day." She reached across the console and squeezed my hand. "One more night." Then she smiled. "Tomorrow, I finally get to call you my husband." Normally I would have smiled back. This time I forced it. When I got home, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. I stared at it for several minutes. Then I walked away. I made coffee, turned on the television, muted it almost immediately. Nothing could distract me. The envelope seemed to fill the entire room. Finally, my phone vibrated. A message from Claire. "Have you read it?" I replied. "No." Her response came less than 10 seconds later. "Good. Don't." I frowned. 5 minutes ago she'd wanted me to know the truth. Now she was telling me not to read it. Before I could ask why, my phone rang. "Claire." I answered immediately. "What changed?" Her voice sounded different, almost panicked. "I made a mistake." "What are you talking about?" "I shouldn't have given it to you. You said I deserved to know." "You do. Then why shouldn't I read it?" Silence. Then she quietly said, "Because I realized something." "What?" "If you read those words, you'll only know who Olivia was. You won't know who she became." She hung up before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone. Nothing about this made sense anymore. Claire wanted me to know. Then she didn't. Olivia had written the letter, but never sent it. Every answer created two more questions. At exactly 11:18 p.m., another message appeared. This time from Olivia. Just one sentence. If Claire gave you the letter, please don't read it alone. I felt my heartbeat quicken. I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. You know about it. Yes, you knew Claire still had it. A pause. Then quietly. I always hoped she'd destroyed it. What's in it? Another pause. Finally, the worst decision I've ever made. I closed my eyes. Did you lie to me? No. Did you hide something? Yes. For 3 years? Yes. My throat tightened. Would you have ever told me? This time, she didn't answer. The silence lasted so long it became an answer of its own. Finally, she whispered, Can I come over? Why? Because, if tonight is the night you stop loving me, I'd rather watch it happen than imagine it for the rest of my life. She arrived 12 minutes later. No makeup, hair tied back, wearing the gray sweater she'd stolen from me during our first winter together. Normally, I would have smiled. Tonight, I barely noticed. She stepped inside. Her eyes immediately found the envelope on the kitchen table. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she walked over, placed her hand on top of it. I wrote this the 4th day after we met. I frowned. Why? She gave a sad smile. Because I knew if I fell in love with you, I'd eventually have to tell you. And you never did. No. Why? She looked down. Because every year, it became harder. I nodded slowly. I asked you something on the phone. She already knew the question. You asked whether I would have ever told you. Yes. She closed her eyes. I honestly don't know. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but somehow it felt like the first completely honest thing she'd said all night. I pulled out a chair. So tell me now. She sat across from me, the envelope still between us. You know I testified in a murder trial. I know. You know the man was innocent. I know. She nodded. That's not what this letter is about. My heartbeat quickened. What then? She took a slow breath. 2 years after his conviction, I received a phone call. I frowned. From who? Someone who said they had information about the case. What kind of information? They'd seen another man leaving the warehouse. I stared at her. A witness? She nodded. He'd been too afraid to come forward. What did you do? I met him. And he told me everything. She looked away. I believed him. The room suddenly felt much smaller. You believed him? Yes. I leaned forward. Olivia, if you believed him, why didn't you go to the police? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the envelope, pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. She slid it across the table. It wasn't about the murder. It wasn't about the trial. The headline read, Local School Counselor of the Year. There was a photograph underneath. A younger Olivia, smiling, holding an award. The date caught my attention. It was 3 months after she'd met that witness. I looked back at her. I don't understand. She nodded. I know. I was offered that job the same week. I frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Her voice broke. Everything. She looked directly into my eyes. The detective handling the case asked me one question. What? She swallowed. He said, if you reopen this now, the newspapers will make you the face of the wrongful conviction. Silence. They told me no school would hire me. No family would trust me with their children. They said every parent would Google my name, and all they'd ever see was the woman who helped send an innocent man to prison. I felt something twist in my stomach. So you chose your career? She nodded. Yes. Then before I could say another word, she added the sentence that hurt even more. And I hated myself for it before I even walked out of that office. The room fell silent. Finally I asked, so you let him stay in prison? A tear rolled down her face. Yes. For 9 more years. She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame the detectives. She didn't blame the prosecutor. She didn't blame the system. She simply whispered, I chose the easier life, and another man paid for it. I looked at the envelope. That's what you wanted to tell me. She nodded. I wrote that letter because I knew, if we ever became serious, you deserved the chance to leave before loving someone capable of making a choice like that. I looked down at the first page, then back at her. Claire said this isn't the whole story. Olivia's expression changed. For the first time that night, she looked confused. What do you mean? She told me that after I hear everything, The decision won't be mine. Before Olivia could answer, someone knocked on the front door. 3 quiet knocks. She closed her eyes. That's him. I frowned. Who? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. The man I let spend 9 extra years in prison. She didn't move. Neither did I. The silence between us stretched for several long seconds. Finally, I asked, "He's here?" Olivia nodded. I asked him to come. I stared at her. You invited him? Yes. The night before our wedding. Yes. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. You knew Claire was going to tell me. She looked down. I hoped she wouldn't, but I prepared in case she did. Another knock echoed through the apartment. Softer this time, almost hesitant. Olivia stood. If you want me to send him away, I will. I looked at the door, then back at her. No. I want to hear everything. She slowly opened the door. The man standing outside looked nothing like the monster I'd imagined. He was probably in his early 50s, gray beginning to creep into his dark hair, worn jeans, old work boots, a weathered face, the kind you only get after years of carrying something heavy. He looked at Olivia first. You sure? She nodded once. Then he looked at me. You must be Ryan. I didn't offer my hand. You know who I am. He gave a small nod. I've known about you for almost a year. That caught me off guard. What? Olivia quietly explained. I told him when we got engaged. I turned toward her. You told him? Before you told me? Her eyes filled with tears. I told him because I needed to know whether I even deserved to marry you. The words landed harder than I expected. The man quietly stepped inside. I don't want to make this worse. I just think you deserve answers. I folded my arms. Fine. Start talking. He remained standing. I spent 11 years in prison for a murder I didn't commit. I know. I lost my business, my home, my daughter. My mother died while I was inside. Every sentence was calm. Too calm. Like he'd repeated them so many times they no longer belonged to him. Then he looked toward Olivia. She came to see me 3 months after I was released. Olivia lowered her eyes. I expected excuses. I expected lawyers. I expected someone trying to protect their reputation. He smiled sadly. Instead, she apologized. She apologized for almost an hour. I never said a word. He paused. When she finished, I told her to leave. She nodded. I did. But I came back. He looked at me. 2 weeks later. Then again. Then again. I finally stopped counting. I frowned. Why? He answered before Olivia could. Because she wasn't asking me to forgive her. She was asking me to tell her how to live with herself. The room fell silent. I couldn't answer that. So I told her the truth. What truth? He looked directly at me. I told her she didn't deserve forgiveness. Olivia closed her eyes. I believed him. He continued. I told her she had taken 11 years from me, and that the least she could do was spend the rest of her life remembering it. I stared at him. You actually said that? Yes. I meant every word. Another silence. Then his voice became quieter. For a long time, I wanted someone else to hurt as much as I did. I glanced at Olivia. She never looked up. She came back every year. He continued. My birthday. The anniversary of the trial. The day I was released. Christmas. Sometimes she just left letters. Sometimes she left groceries. Sometimes she just left letters. Sometimes she left groceries. From. Sometimes she just left letters. Sometimes she left groceries. From. Each one had the same handwriting. Olivia's. He placed them on my kitchen table. There are 83. I looked at the stack. 83. He nodded. She wrote every single one by hand. I never answered. Olivia finally spoke. I didn't expect you to. He looked at her. I know. Then he turned back to me. I want you to understand something. I waited. I didn't come here to tell you she's innocent. She isn't. What she did changed my life forever. He paused. So did what I did. I frowned. What do you mean? His eyes filled with regret. I let one mistake become her entire identity. I watched her punish herself, and I convinced myself she deserved it. He looked down at the stack of letters. Last month, I finally read every single one. He swallowed hard. Do you know what I realized? Neither of us answered. He looked straight at me. For 11 years, I thought she was asking me to forgive her. A long pause. I was wrong. He glanced at Olivia. She'd already accepted that I never would. Another pause. She was asking for permission to stop hating herself. The apartment became completely silent. Then he said the one sentence that changed the way I looked at everything. I couldn't give it to her. So maybe the man she's about to marry can. Ryan left a few minutes later, not because I asked him to, because he understood. This conversation isn't about me anymore. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Without turning around, he quietly said, "For what it's worth. I hope she lets you love her." The apartment door closed behind him. The silence that followed felt almost unbearable. I looked at the stack of 83 letters, then at Olivia. Is everything he said true? She nodded. Yes. You came back 83 times? Yes. And he never asked you to? No. I picked up the top envelope. Still sealed. Why didn't you stop? She looked at me with tired eyes. Because every morning, I woke up thinking someone else deserved the life I had. Those words hit me harder than I expected. You really believe that? I still do. I shook my head. No. You believe you deserve to suffer. She didn't argue. Because she couldn't. I slowly sat down across from her. There has to be more. She frowned. What do you mean? You've spent 12 years punishing yourself. You've built your entire life around one mistake. You became a child psychologist. You volunteer. You donate half your income. You barely buy anything for yourself. I looked around my apartment. You've never cared about money. You've never cared about expensive vacations. You've never cared about any of the things most people do. I looked back at her. I always thought that's just who you were. A tear rolled down her face. It isn't, she whispered. I built that person. I frowned. What? The woman you fell in love with didn't exist before the trial. I didn't understand. She continued. I became her, one decision at a time. I kept asking myself, what would someone worthy of another chance do today? She smiled through tears. So I'd help someone. The next day, I'd ask the same question again and again. For 12 years, I couldn't say a word. She wasn't describing a perfect woman. She was describing someone trying to outrun the worst day of her life. Then she reached into her purse. There is one more thing. She placed a small velvet box on the table. I frowned. What is this? I bought it 6 months ago. I opened it. Inside was the engagement ring I'd proposed with. My heart stopped. I looked up. What is this? I was going to give it back. What? The night you proposed. I almost said no. I stared at her. You said yes immediately. I know. I lied. The room went completely silent. She took a shaky breath. I had already written a letter. If you had proposed before I told you everything. I had promised myself I'd refuse. I looked down at the ring. Then why didn't you? She started crying. Because for one selfish moment, I wanted to believe I could have a normal life. She covered her face. And that's the lie I never forgave myself for. I sat there trying to understand. Everything I'd believed about our relationship suddenly felt different. Not fake. Just incomplete. Finally, I asked the question I'd been avoiding all night. If Claire had never given me that letter, would you have married me tomorrow? Without telling me. Olivia didn't answer immediately. She looked at the floor for what felt like forever. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Yes. I closed my eyes. Not because she'd hidden her past, because she'd just answered the hardest question with the hardest truth. No excuses, no explanations, just yes. Another long silence passed. Finally, she stood. I think you know enough now. She slipped the engagement ring back into the box. Set it on the kitchen table. If you don't come tomorrow, I'll understand. She walked to the front door. Her hand rested on the handle. For a few seconds, she didn't move. Then, without turning around, she quietly said, I've spent 12 years believing I didn't deserve to be loved. I won't spend another 12 begging someone to prove me wrong. She opened the door and walked out, leaving the ring on the table between us. The ring stayed exactly where she'd left it. I didn't sleep. I didn't watch television. I didn't call anyone. I simply sat in my kitchen until sunrise, replaying every conversation we'd ever had, every anniversary, every vacation, every quiet evening on the couch. I kept asking myself the same question. Was any of it real? The answer kept surprising me. Yes, every laugh was real. Every kiss was real. Every promise she'd made was real. The only thing that wasn't was the silence. And somehow that made the decision even harder. At 9 that morning, my best man called. You ready? I looked at the garment bag hanging in my bedroom. No. You getting cold feet? I honestly don't know what I'm feeling. He laughed. That's normal. No, it isn't. I almost told him everything. Instead, I said, I'll let you know. At 11, Claire knocked on my apartment door. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. She noticed the ring box still sitting on the table. So, you know. I know. She nodded. I figured. We sat in silence for several moments. Finally, I asked, did you want me to leave her? Claire looked genuinely surprised. No, I wanted you to have the chance she never gave you. The chance to choose. I stared out the window. Why didn't you hate her? She smiled sadly. Oh, I did. For a long time. I hated what she did. I hated what she became afterward. What do you mean? Claire looked toward the stack of letters. My sister stopped living. I frowned. What? She kept breathing. She kept working. She even kept smiling. But she stopped believing she deserved anything good. She wiped a tear away. Do you know how many birthdays she skipped because she said she hadn't earned celebrating? I shook my head. How many promotions she turned down because she thought someone better deserved them? No. How many relationships she ended before they became serious? She looked directly at me. You weren't the first man she loved. I felt my stomach tighten. What? You were the first one she couldn't walk away from. Claire stood, walked toward the door, then stopped. If you decide not to marry her, I'll understand. She paused. But don't make the mistake of thinking you're leaving a liar. You're leaving a woman who never learned how to forgive herself. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 4. At 3:55, the guests were already seated. The musicians had stopped playing. People had begun whispering. Olivia stood alone inside the bridal suite, still wearing her wedding dress, still holding the bouquet. Her mother quietly cried in the corner. No one knew whether I was coming. Neither did I. Then, at exactly 3:59, my car pulled into the vineyard. Every head turned. I walked inside, not toward the ceremony, toward the bridal suite. Olivia looked up when I entered. For a second, hope appeared in her eyes. Then she noticed I wasn't wearing my jacket, or my tie, or my wedding shoes. She understood immediately. It's over. I quietly closed the door behind me. No, she frowned. What? It's postponed. She stared at me. I don't understand. I walked closer. We're not getting married today. A tear rolled down her face. I know. I gently shook my head. No, you don't. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the engagement ring, and placed it in her hand. I'm asking you to marry me again. She looked completely confused. What? This time, without secrets. She began crying. Ryan, I don't deserve. I interrupted her. I know. She looked at me. You've spent 12 years deciding what you deserve. I think it's time someone else had a vote. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I took her hand. I'm not ready to be your husband today. She nodded through tears. I understand. But, I smiled for the first time since the rehearsal dinner. I'd like the chance to become one. We canceled the ceremony. Some guests were angry. Some were confused. Rumors spread for weeks. Neither of us cared. For the first time since we'd met, there were no more secrets. We started therapy together. Not because our relationship was broken. Because we wanted to build it on something stronger than silence. 6 months later, we returned to the same vineyard. There were no photographers. No elaborate decorations. No 100 guests. Just our parents, Claire, my best man, and a pastor. Before the ceremony began, the pastor asked the traditional question, if anyone believes these two should not be joined in marriage. Speak now. Claire smiled, looked at me, then quietly said, I already did. The entire room laughed. Even Olivia. When it was my turn to say my vows, I folded the paper in my pocket. I didn't need it anymore. Instead, I looked into Olivia's eyes and said, I used to believe trust meant never making a terrible mistake. I shook my head. I was wrong. Trust means telling the truth before someone else has to. A tear rolled down her cheek. I continued. You once asked me if I'd still love you after knowing the worst thing you'd ever done. I took her hands. My answer is different. I don't love you despite your past. I love you because you finally trusted me enough to stop carrying it alone. When the ceremony ended, Claire hugged us both. Then she whispered something only I could hear. Thank you for proving I was wrong. I smiled. You weren't wrong. She looked confused. You were just early. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Olivia and I sat alone on the porch of our new home. She rested her head on my shoulder. So, do you think we'll ever stop talking about the past? I looked at the sunset, then back at her. No. She laughed softly. Why not? Because the past brought us here. I wrapped my arm around her. But it doesn't get to decide where we go next. For the first time in 12 years, Olivia smiled without guilt. And for the first time since opening that envelope, I knew exactly who I had married. Not the perfect woman, the honest one.